Some messages are only a few lines long, yet powerful enough to shatter an entire life. That message came on a Wednesday morning while I was behind the counter at my beauty store. There was no screaming, no glass shattering, no dramatic scene like in the movies. Just a single line on the phone screen. Cold, empty, and so cruel I wasn't sure if I was dreaming. Brenda, I'm gone. I've moved to San Diego with Ivy. Oh, and I emptied our joint account. Good luck. Ivy, 23 years old, the new hire at his company. And me, 41, his wife of 14 years. Just stood there staring at the flickering words, like the whole world had slipped from under me. I don't remember how I turned off the screen. I just remember smiling as a customer named Margaret picked out a dusty rose lipstick. I even wrapped it in cream-colored tissue, tied with a red ribbon, my shop's signature packaging style. No one saw the panic in me. No one saw how tightly I clenched my fists behind the counter, nails digging into my skin. Because I didn't allow myself to fall apart, not then. When I locked up and went home, I still hadn't cried. I just replayed the signs from the past few weeks, the ones I had tried so hard to ignore. Cancelled dinners at the last minute, sudden overtime that never matched up with his actual workload, changed phone passwords, the strange perfume clinging to his shirts. I knew, some part of me had always known. In fact, nearly 3 months ago, when I accidentally found a hotel receipt for two, I opened a separate savings account at another bank. I didn't say a word. I quietly began transferring small portions of my shop's revenue into the new account, leaving just enough in the joint account to avoid raising Gavin's suspicion. He thought he was clever, but he forgot. I'm the woman who built this beauty brand from scratch. I know the value of preparation and of staying silent at the right moment. I didn't reply to Gavin's message right away. I simply texted the lawyer I had met a few weeks prior. He just made his first move, I wrote. It's time, she replied. The papers are ready. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. I put my phone down. I sat on the couch in my living room, the house I inherited from my parents, still in my name, despite Gavin's repeated suggestions to add his. I looked around. Everything was still in place. The warm room with oak floors, pretty potted plants by the window, the fluffy white rug I ordered from Minnesota. Gavin never liked this house. He said it was small, outdated. But for me, it's where I've always felt safe. And now, it would be my fortress. That night, I opened the bottle of wine I had saved for our 15th wedding anniversary. I poured myself a glass, not to celebrate, but to mark an ending. The end of a marriage I'd held on to too long. The end of playing the quiet, self-sacrificing wife. As I organized the paperwork to send to my lawyer the next morning, my phone lit up again. The second message, from Gavin. I know this must be hard for you, especially now that you're not as young anymore. At least you still have your little shop to keep you busy. I laughed not from pain but at the way he called my business, a little shop. My beauty store is not just a shop, it's 11 years of weekends missed. Of sleepless nights researching products, of hundreds of hours live streaming skincare tips to customers. It's also my main source of income, far more stable than Gavin's mid-level engineering job ever was. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that packed every order, wrote every line of content for the website. There was no ring anymore. I'd taken it off the moment I read that first message. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was Brenda, a 41-year-old woman betrayed by her husband, but fully prepared. Tomorrow would be a new chapter. But tonight, I gave myself the peace I hadn't felt in months. The next morning, while the city of Seattle was still sleepy in the early mist, I was already sitting in my office with 2 folders in front of me, one for my lawyer, the other a copy of all financial transactions from our joint account over the past 8 months. With suspicious items marked in red pen. I never thought I'd be the type of woman sitting across from a divorce attorney. But now, I wasn't just sitting. I was leading. My lawyer, Tanya Blake, a Cuban-American woman about 10 years older than me, was sharp and calm to the point of being cold. She had handled hundreds of complex divorces, and I knew I couldn't have found a better representative. Gavin's shown his hand, Tanya said as she flipped through the screenshots I had sent. And he's not nearly as clever as he thinks. I smiled faintly. He never realized I was paying attention. Gavin thought he had the perfect plan. Empty the account, move away with his mistress, then send a goodbye text. What he didn't know was that I'd quietly been building a financial fortress 3 months earlier. After I discovered the hotel receipt, I opened a savings account at a small bank in the suburbs. Not flashy, but very discreet. Each week I transferred a small portion of my store's revenue into it. Not much, but consistent. I also started backing up every transaction from the joint account, documenting unusual activity, especially payments Gavin made at bars, high-end restaurants, or jewelry stores I had never been to. And most importantly, I told no one. Not a single friend, employee, not even my mother. I didn't want anyone to accidentally let something slip. 4 days after Gavin left, I got a call from the bank where he had used our joint credit card to book flights and a hotel. I had already filed a fraud report and emailed Gavin's texts as proof. The bank representative, a man named Kyle, didn't bother hiding his satisfaction. "We'll reverse those charges and freeze the card immediately," he said. "Would you like us to remove Gavin's access from the account?" "I want it removed right now," I answered without hesitation. I couldn't imagine Gavin's face when he arrived at the airport unable to board, or when he got the notification that the 4-star hotel booking in San Diego had been cancelled. But I didn't have to imagine it, because that night, I got a message from him. "What the hell are you doing? Did you cancel our trip?" I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, filed it into the folder labeled evidence, and kept making myself dinner. A proper meal for the first time in weeks. The next message didn't surprise me. "I'll let you stay at the house for a while, just until you find a more suitable place." I laughed out loud. That house was my parents' legacy. I had never put Gavin's name on the deed, no matter how many times he suggested it over the years. Back then I just thought it was because of inheritance complications. But now I knew. It was self-preservation, and it saved me. A few days later, Tanya sent me the draft divorce petition and a request to the court for a temporary freeze on all joint assets. "You may have spent it all," she said, "but the court can still attempt recovery. What matters is proving intent to deceive and presenting clear records of your separate property." I nodded and opened the folder of receipts, texts, and emails. I had prepared for this, and this time, I wasn't backing down. A week later I received a call from Gavin's mother, Mrs. Edith. Her voice lacked the usual cheer. "Brenda," she began, "Gavin says you're making things difficult. He says you're trying to destroy his new life." I put her on speaker while I folded paper bags for online orders. "Mrs. Edith, I have messages from Gavin bragging that he emptied our joint account and used our credit card to book flights for him and his girlfriend." There was silence on the line. I don't want conflict, but my lawyer advised me to minimize contact with Gavin's family during this process. "I hope you understand." "I understand. It's just heartbreaking that things turned out this way." "I didn't want this either, ma'am." The call ended. I continued my work, feeling strangely at peace. The next day, Tanya sent me confirmation that the emergency hearing was scheduled for Monday. The judge had granted a preliminary freeze on the assets, enough to prevent Gavin from liquidating anything else. On Sunday night, I received another string of messages from Gavin, this time veiled threats. "I have copies of your store's financials. You know half of that business is mine." I didn't respond. I quietly forwarded them to Tanya. "More self-incriminating evidence," she replied. I poured myself another glass of wine, not because I needed it, but because I deserved it. Gavin had underestimated me far too much. He thought he could manipulate me like he did during the early years of our marriage, but this 41-year-old woman wasn't the same girl who used to bite her tongue to keep the peace. I had prepared, I had documented, and now I would claim what was mine, not with anger, but with clarity, resolve, and the law. Tomorrow would be the day Gavin realized who truly walked away free. That morning it was lightly raining in Seattle. On the way to King County Courthouse, I didn't feel nervous, only focused, like an arrow already drawn in a bow. Every step I took wasn't for revenge, but for confirmation I hadn't been broken. Gavin arrived 3 minutes late, still in his wrinkled blue shirt, overgelled hair, tight jeans that made him look like he was desperately clinging to his 30s, which had passed nearly a decade ago. Ivy wasn't with him. I wasn't surprised. Maybe she was beginning to realize that the California dream isn't so easy to live off someone else's credit card. Tanya sat beside me, sharp and cold as always. "Don't look at him. We only look at the judge," she reminded me. The judge was an Asian American man in his early 50s named Victor Le. He flipped through the documents quickly, his eyes clearly used to the theatrics of divorce hearings. Gavin had hired his own lawyer, a slim blonde woman who looked like she had more success with charm than airtight legal work. And she chose the wrong opponent when she opened with, "Your Honor, my client admits to making some impulsive decisions, but what Mrs. Brenda Harrison is doing has been premeditated. She's been planning this for months, hiding money, evading fair asset division." Tanya leaned toward the microphone. "Premeditated, yes, but not in the negative sense that the opposing counsel is implying. My client has legally separate property, clearly defined before the marriage. The evidence we've submitted shows preparation, not deception." And then, document by document, the proof was laid out. The deed to the house, under my name since 2008, before Gavin and I got married. The business registration for the beauty store, with only my name listed. Revenue records proving the store's income had been kept separate, never touching the joint account. And of course screenshots of Gavin's texts, bragging about emptying the joint account, booking flights for him and Ivy, and the arrogant line, "At least you still have your little shop to keep you busy." I glanced at Gavin as the judge read each text aloud. He shrank in his seat. It seemed like, for the first time, he realized just how many traces he had left behind. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Lay said, "do you deny using the joint credit card for personal expenses after unilaterally withdrawing all funds from the account?" Gavin stammered. I just thought I had the right. I wanted to divide things clearly, and I was planning to pay it back later." "With what?" Tanya cut in. "Ivy's July paycheck from the nail salon in San Diego?" A few people in the courtroom chuckled. Gavin blushed. The judge tapped his pen lightly and looked back at the file. "Based on clear evidence of unauthorized use of joint assets, the court hereby orders a temporary freeze on all accounts under both names until a final ruling is made. Mr. Harrison is required to return the full amount withdrawn from the joint account within 10 days. "But the money's gone," Gavin blurted. "We spent it renting a place, deposits, buying furniture. I don't have much left." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Then I suggest you find a legal way to borrow or liquidate personal assets. Using someone else's money is not a lawful solution." Gavin's lawyer attempted to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, my client contributed to Mrs. Harrison's business, not financially, but emotionally, with support and encouragement in the early stages." Tanya smiled, eyes still on the folder. "We also have proof of those emotional contributions, including a string of texts and social media posts in which Mr. Harrison called my client's business a time-wasting hobby, a silly little shop, and not a real job." The judge tapped his pen again. "The court acknowledges both arguments. However, at this time, we see clear evidence that Mrs. Harrison maintained asset separation, while Mr. Harrison deliberately misused joint funds. Further proceedings will move forward to protect the legal rights of the affected party." As the temporary hearing ended, Gavin quietly gathered his papers. I didn't look at him. I walked straight down the courthouse hallway, the click of my heels echoing against the marble, punctuating each step with quiet triumph. Tanya walked beside me. "You did well." I took a deep breath. It wasn't joy, but it was justice. A feeling I hadn't known for years while being married to someone who never valued my worth. 3 days later, I received a message from Ivy. Not an apology. Just a single line. "I know he lied. I was wrong to believe every sweet word he said. I hope you find peace." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry at her, but because I no longer cared. My life is not a stage for others to step into, cause chaos, and quietly exit hoping for forgiveness. This story isn't over, but from now on, the person writing the next chapter is me. It took less than a week after the first court hearing for the consequences to start falling on Gavin. Like dominoes I had known would topple, just waiting for the right moment. I heard from Tanya that the court had officially issued an order freezing Gavin's personal accounts and requiring him to repay nearly all the money he withdrew from the joint account. But of course, Gavin no longer had the money. He had spent most of it on an unfinished vacation with Ivy, expensive items meant to impress, and a brand new laptop to start a new life. Messages from him started appearing again, this time without the smugness or sarcasm from before. "Can we talk? Do you really want to destroy me this badly? You know I didn't mean to, I just wanted freedom." I didn't respond. I simply took screenshots and saved them in the folder, titled, Evidence, Part 2. Tanya would know exactly when to use them. From a few old acquaintances, I learned that Gavin was staying at a roadside motel in the south end of the city. Ivy had left a few days after the hearing. She had moved in with her sister, and didn't bother hiding it on Instagram. The last post I saw before I blocked her was a photo with a caption, "Sometimes, people don't need a hero. They need an exit." And escape, that's exactly what Ivy did. I don't blame her. The truth is, Gavin was never ready to rebuild from the ground up. He just wanted someone else to rebuild life for him, so he could coast along. Not long after, Tanya informed me that Gavin had tried filing a petition to claim a share of my beauty store. He argued that even if he didn't invest financially, he supported me emotionally. Tanya smirked as she told me, "We attached every message where he called your store childish, a money-wasting hobby, and just a little shop for fun. The judge didn't need anything more." In the end, the petition was dismissed. Quickly and cleanly. Gavin's mother, Mrs. Edith, called me on a rainy afternoon. She didn't cry, but I could hear exhaustion in every breath. "Brenda, he asked to move back home, again." I stayed silent. "He said his roommate couldn't stand him, said Ivy betrayed him, said you pushed him to the edge." "I didn't push anyone, Mrs. Edith," I replied calmly. "Gavin chose that path himself." She sighed. "We don't know what to do anymore. He refuses to admit fault, refuses to start over. He still blames everyone else, except himself." I didn't know what to say. I only saw one thing, the blurry regret of a mother realizing the son she raised was no longer a grown man, but a boy who never learned how to grow up. That night I received Gavin's final message before I blocked his number. "You won. Hope you're happy with your perfect life. As for me, I'm living in my mom's basement. Congratulations." I didn't reply. There was no need. The next morning, I made coffee and opened the window, watching sunlight pour over the lavender pots in front of my shop. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt relief. Gavin lost everything. But not because I took it from him. Because he lost it all the moment he underestimated who I really was. If someone had once told me that the greatest pain in life could become a stepping stone to better things, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't believe in hope, but because I used to think loss only left emptiness. But now I understand. Sometimes, the very moment you feel completely broken is when you begin to rebuild your life in ways no one, not even you, expected. 6 months after Gavin left, my little beauty shop, the one he once called a way to kill time, opened a second location in downtown Bellevue. I hired 2 more employees, started expanding online sales, and revenue doubled in just 1 quarter. My brand, Brenda Grace Beauty, gradually gained love from local customers, and soon, small business magazines reached out to request interviews. For the first time in my life, I was called a successful businesswoman. Not Gavin's wife, not the betrayed woman, but me, Brenda, the woman who built, protected, and grew a brand with her own hands. I received an invitation to speak at a startup women's conference in Tacoma. The topic? How to safeguard and protect your assets, both financially and emotionally. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed standing in front of a crowd to tell stories. But then I thought, how many women had silently endured like I did? How many gave up everything for others and lost it all because they didn't know how to prepare? If my story could help even one person avoid that, then it was worth sharing. The hall that day wasn't large, but it was full. Women, both young and older, watched me closely from the moment I took the microphone. I'm not here as a financial expert, I began. I'm just a woman whose husband once told her he was leaving, through a text, and who found out their joint account had been drained, followed by a ha ha ha. The audience laughed softly but with understanding. And I shared. Not to complain, but to give. I talked about the importance of keeping financial independence, about never feeling guilty for protecting what you've built, about listening to your intuition, especially when your heart tries to silence it. After the talk, a young woman approached me. She wore a simple blouse, glasses, and held a notebook in her hands. Ms. Brenda, I just wanted to say thank you. I used to think keeping financial independence while in love was selfish, but now I understand. It's smart. I smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. No one has the right to ask you to sacrifice everything for a relationship. If it's truly good, it won't ask you to give up yourself. A week later, I received an email from a women's startup group in Portland inviting me to serve as an honorary advisor. They didn't want me to teach makeup tips, they wanted me to show them how to protect what they've built, from their trust to their financial records. I had become a source of inspiration, not because I wanted to be a role model, but because I dared not to stay silent. And Gavin? I didn't hear much about him anymore. I only knew that his former company didn't renew his contract after the incident, and he was working part-time for a small web design firm in Renton. No one brought him up in conversations around me anymore. But the funny thing was, people started talking about me more. They messaged me asking for business advice, how to stay mentally strong after divorce. Some even asked for guidance when they suspected infidelity in their marriages. I never thought I'd become a source of strength for others, but then I realized sometimes people don't need an expert. They just need someone who's survived and still standing to say, you'll be okay too. I no longer hold anger inside, I hold pride. For the calm I chose instead of rage. For the quiet decisions I made that turned out to be right. For the strength I didn't know I had until everything fell apart. Brenda's story is proof that sometimes life's biggest shocks aren't the end, they're a chance to start a new, stronger chapter. Betrayed, financially drained, and emotionally scarred, she didn't fall, she prepared, protected herself, and turned the tables with clarity. In real life, the biggest lesson is, never underestimate the power of preparation, financial independence, and the quiet strength of a woman who chooses to rise for herself. What do you think about Brenda's journey? Have you experienced something similar or known someone like her? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel to discover more emotional stories about family life.